King came to Memphis to fight for.
45 years ago, Dr. King was killed right there as he was here in Memphis to help the sanitation workers strike. That same union says if Dr. King were alive today, he'd want to be back in Memphis to help city workers with what they're facing now.
Ultimately, he gave his life in support of the sanitation workers, and we can never forget. We should never forget.
Lee Saunders, president of the AFSCME labor union, says the 1968 sanitation strike was about improving pay, earning dignity and respect. They've made many strides since then.
Yes, things have changed since 1968, but they just came a little way. We still mistreated.
Sanitation workers held signs at City Council Tuesday saying they drive unsafe vehicles. And more than anything, they'd like to reverse the 4.6% pay cut all city workers got 2 years ago.
We have a mayor who is not recognizing and not respecting the collective bargaining process.
The union even sued the city, claiming Memphis violated their bargaining policy sparked by the 1968 strike.
Whether we go through a collective bargaining process or not, this administration will sit and negotiate fairly across the table with the employees.
Wharton says the upcoming events on the anniversary of King's death are good for the city, that King deserves that and more. So while everyone respects and admires King's work, some believe there's still much left to be done.
If Dr. King was alive today, he would be here in Memphis.
Tomorrow night, people like Al Sharpton and Martin Luther King III will be at an event at the Mason Temple, where Dr. King gave his famous mountaintop speech. In downtown Memphis, Natasha Chen, WREG, News Channel 3.
With this week's 45th commemoration of the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, it comes at a time when AFSCME, the Sanitation Workers Union, along with unions representing fire and police, are engaged in contentious contract negotiations with the city of Memphis. Now, those negotiations are getting special attention from the visiting national president of AFSCME, Lee Saunders. Fox 13's Les Smith sat down for a one-on-one with Saunders today. How'd that conversation go, Les?
Very interesting man. You know, if you juggle the facts that they haven't had a raise in 5 years while taking a 4.6% pay cut with the rest of the city employees, they don't have a pension, and the promised city council buyout fund never materialized. As they negotiate a new contract, AFSCME Local 1733 is in need of a confidence booster, and over the next 2 days, they could certainly get that. As one of the most recognized leaders of the labor movement in America for more than 35 years, you might think Lee Saunders' zeal to advance the cause of the working man might have mellowed. You would be wrong. For in his first full year as president of the 1.6 million member AFSCME union, Saunders is determined to re-energize embattled public service workers nationwide. So what better place to relive and rekindle the fires of past and present struggles than by coming to Memphis to commemorate the sacrifice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on behalf of the famed sanitation workers strike 45 years ago this week.
As Dr. King came to Memphis in 1968, we're bringing national leaders to Memphis. We're trying to re-energize and mobilize our communities and organize and educate our communities about the struggles that still continue. Dr. King understood that there was value and there was importance of linking the labor movement with the civil rights movement, with the faith-based community, with people who are just trying to make ends meet.
Joining Saunders in town for a panel discussion and then the naming of a city street in honor of the 1,300 striking workers King came to help will be his son, Martin Luther King III, and activist Al Sharpton. But rather than solely dwelling on history, Saunders is ready to throw the full backing of his politically active union behind the current contract negotiating efforts of AFSCME Local 1733 with the city. Saunders leveled a shot above the bow toward the man he and city employees' unions hold responsible for the controversial 4.6% pay cut that sent them economically reeling.
It seems that the mayor has forgotten about history, and it seems that he wants to take us back to 1968.
But just as King espoused decades ago, economics and civil rights are inextricably intertwined. It often produces a kind of financial class warfare Saunders contends where only organized labor continues to fight to even the playing field.
We actually are standing in the way from that 1% who are trying to gain more power and more wealth at the expense of the 99% in this country who are playing by the rules every single day.
Just don't expect Lee Saunders to let up. as long as he feels the struggle for the working men and women continues. Yeah, and unions, especially in the last year or so, have been in the headlines a lot. We want to know if you think that employee unions nationwide have lost their influence since 1968, when they were pretty strong. Hit us up with your opinions on our Facebook, My Fox Memphis, where you can like us as well. Les Smith, Fox 30.
From our Washington, D.C. studios, Roland Martin, good morning.
Hey, folks, what's happening, Tom? Today kicks off Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network, and so we are spending a little time in New York with TV1's Washington Watch, shooting some panels. I interviewed him yesterday, so we had a good time with that. But he's going to be heading to Memphis today, where the AFSCME, what they're doing is they are commemorating, of course, the 45th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King in Memphis. And a lot of people talk about Dr. King and being in Memphis without realizing, I mean, he was there fighting on behalf of sanitation workers, fighting on behalf of those brothers in terms of employment, in terms of health insurance, things along those lines. So joining us right now is the president of the AFSCME union. He is Lee Saunders, who was the first African-American to head the 1.6 million member unit. Hey, Lee, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Doing great. Lee, put this in context for us because, again, people talk about the assassination of Dr. King and why he was in Memphis, but the things that he was fighting for then, you still are facing when you talk about opportunities for African Americans to be able to grow and thrive.
Well, there's no question about it. We're honoring the 45th anniversary of the sanitation workers' strike. 1,300 men who were tired of being mistreated in the city of Memphis. They had no dignity or no respect. They had no voice on the job, and they took a militant action. And back in 1968, they went on strike. Dr. King came and supported those strikers because he understood the importance of linking labor rights with civil rights and economic rights. And he came to Memphis on numerous occasions, and ultimately, as all of us know, he sacrificed his life in support of that strike and in support of that struggle. You know, there's an old saying within the labor movement, and that saying is the labor movement built the middle class, which we did, then the civil rights movement certainly supplied the building blocks. And that was the connection, and that was the link back in 1968.
How bad was it for the garbage workers back then?
Well, you had two individuals that were actually crushed by a truck, and that's what caused the strike, because the union and the sanitation workers have been trying to get the city to recognize that there were some very serious safety violations that were occurring. But the city didn't want to hear any of that. They didn't want to hear from black workers who were complaining about what was happening on the job, and that's why they resorted to the strike. But when the strike occurred, I mean, there were marches every single day. The police attacked the marches on numerous occasions, attacked the marches when Dr. King was here. So, I mean, this was an act, a militant act in 1968 that we need to always remember. It's part of our history.
Yeah,
Lee, eight of those workers are still working there.
Really?
Eight of those brothers are still working, and they range in age from 60 to 80.
I was with a couple of them 2 days ago. I'm going to be with another today. I mean, it's just amazing
still alive,
that they're
still working
on the job.
Yeah, Tom, still working. And in fact, Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, I read a story a couple of years ago where they were still fighting for some of the things that they rallied against in 68.
Like
well,
what?
As a matter of fact, unfortunately, they still have no pensions. They have Social Security, but they still have no pensions. And we're continuing to fight for that. And as a matter of fact, you know, it's so ironic that in 1968 we were fighting for a voice. They were fighting for collective bargaining, fighting for dignity and respect. We're doing the same thing in 2013 because the mayor of this city is disrespecting the collective bargaining process, and we're taking it to him, man. I mean, we've got 1.6 million members. This is not a Memphis fight. This is a fight with the national union, and we're gonna put some heat on the mayor and educate the community and mobilize the community on it.
And Lee, that mayor is African American.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Ooh. Lee Saunders, AFSCME president, we certainly appreciate it.
That puts things in perspective.
Doesn't it?
To those 8 brothers, hey,
God
man.
bless you.
No pension, and he's still working at 80 years old.
Got to.
Boom, Tom. There you go, Tom.
Oh, man. And that was 1968. Wow.
1968.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Good job, Roland.